Okay, hello everyone. Thanks ever so much for joining us during your lunch hour, or if you're watching it on replay. Hope you enjoy the session that's about to unfold. Got a couple of great guests. We've been having some fun, as always, with our Wi-Fi and Echo and setups, etc. But we're really excited to be here to go through some topics. Just with the other ones, if you guys have been on these before, if you want to put any kind of question in chat, I'm going to do my very best to kind of keep an eye out on what's going on chat, but also be speaking to Dean and Martin, and we'll make sure we get all the questions covered. If there's any question we absolutely can't cover, either for time or it's a complex answer, whatever, we'll make sure we take that away and get that answered. When the content comes out. So. Before we get going, so discovery as a service. So there's two sort of interesting things in there, is the as a service element of it, and obviously the word discovery. We've got some questions to go through, so hopefully at the end of this we'll all be able to kind of know all the things about discovery as a service that we were too embarrassed to ask. And we'll see where we get to. But before we get stuck into content, I just want to do some intros. So. In no particular order, but Dean, do you want to just tell us well, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
And what's your interest in discovery as a service? What's your background? Just tell us a bit about yourself, Dean.
Sure. So I've been in IT over 30 years now. I've worked my way up to architect level. So I've been an enterprise architect, solution architect, etc. I've done a lot of discovery work over the years. Nearly every project involved discovery work. I've just been working with Martin on putting a framework of discovery together for a company called Certes. And that's why we're here as the discovery experts, as it were.
So Martin, I'm definitely coming over to you in a second, but Dean, I just want to say massive respect to you. I don't know if anyone on the call or watching this realizes, but to get to enterprise architect, it's a big deal. There isn't really anything you don't cover as an enterprise architect. So when you need to know what the universe is that you're facing, it's an enterprise architect that you need. And also, Dean, I would say not all enterprise architects are created equally. So I'm really delighted that we've got you in, and with some interesting questions there. So thanks, Dean, for that. Martin, welcome. Apologies for the echo earlier that I think I was creating. So we've got all that technology sorted. Would you like to give us a bit of a background intro from yourself as well, please?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Jon. So similar to Dean, I've been involved in IT going way back to the late 1990s. Started at sort of ground level, ground zero. Actually started as a data cabling engineer. Installing cabling infrastructure and telephony infrastructure, sort of gradually working my way up through the various layers, involved in sort of deployments, but also operational, onto design for rollouts, that type of thing. And then more recently, my roles been focused around specializing in network architecture and security architecture. My experience in terms of discovery, again, so very similar to Dean. It's been involved in a lot of the project work I've done over the years. For a multitude of companies on contract engagements, primarily including sort of BT Global Services, EADS, Packard, Deloitte, FCO, MOD, on and on and on. Basically over about 25 years with the contracting.
Amazing, Martin. And I reckon we could all probably play a bit of match. We've probably all worked for a few of those places. You never know. We might even have been at the same place at the same time. Some of those engagements are massive.
Yeah, it's interesting how often you bump into the same first.
Indeed. Well, look, the first thing I'm going to observe for both of you guys is you've both got backgrounds, which is kind of, you really understand the universe of what's going on. And I'm wondering whether that it relates to discovery, because I'm assuming the whole point of discovery is you're casting a net as wide as possible. You're not missing things out. And so at some point, I suppose we might ask the question about how much of it is, the approach, but also an approach on its own without experience is no good. So there's obviously an element of it of experience as well. So I'm going to ask Dean the first question, but don't worry, Martin, we'll chip in as well. But just and if anyone wants to desperately go first, you can disagree. But just in terms of your personal view, Dean, so not necessarily the official view or whatever, but if you think about the discovery phase of a project, what does it entail, and why do you think it's or do you think it's a crucial step in project management and development? So basically, tee up discovery for us. Why are we here talking about it? Why is it such a big deal?
Okay, so there are basically two types of discovery project in my mind. So you've got the data gathering type discovery project, mainly for analysis and auditing. And then you've got the project discovery, which is the beginning phase of a project. So for example, moving an application to cloud or something like that. Discovery consists of a number of parts, really. So the first thing to do is to identify all the key stakeholders, because understanding what their requirements are is absolutely critical to the success of a discovery project. Then we need to understand what the problem is, and establish clear goals and objectives to solve that problem. So after that, we then do some qualitative and quantitative data gathering, depending on the project. And from that data, we produce artifacts to help stakeholders make informed decisions about the next steps that they want to take. Reason that's crucial is because it helps mitigate the risks for the project. It provides a clear way forward for those stakeholders. It'll uncover issues that you don't want to find out later when you're in the middle of a project. What else here? Helps with planning and budgets, and improves communication. So some stakeholders don't talk to each other, and when you come in, you sort of bring them together and improve the collaboration between the stakeholders. And finally, it improves quality assurance. That's pretty much it, I think.
Well, look, that's a great answer. And what I always like to do is sort of say the opposite of what you've said, to put across the point about what happens then if you don't do discovery. So I think just playing back some of the things that you've just said, if you don't do discovery or something equivalent, you're going to have high risk. You're going to have stakeholders who don't know what's going on. You're going to have maybe we're trying to solve the wrong problem. And also you're not going to have any evidence. You talked about qualitative and quantitative. For folks who aren't as technical on the call, when these folks refer to artifacts, they're not. I don't think that they mean Raiders of the Lost Ark, things that we discover. That you're talking about like technical drawings or designs and documents, and that's what you mean by artifacts.
Apologies.
No, not at all, Dean. This is good. This is if you think about it, folks who watch this need to understand how we translate between the language, and it's a very efficient way of talking. So, Martin, I don't know whether Dean's left you much to put into that space, but if rather than kind of repeating, is there any of those elements that you draw out, Martin, in kind of your experience that you either really enjoy or is very important or is challenging, or any of those elements at all?
Yeah, so I mean, like I think when we're all I think Dean's covered it off pretty well there. But this stakeholder engagement is particularly key at the outset of these projects to understand what the actual problems are, what the outcomes that the organisation is trying to achieve, and then focusing your discovery around that and providing the structure and the methodologies and the artifacts and the outputs and actually need to be back into the organisation so that they can make effective decisions for the project forward.
Cool.
So,
just to pick up on stakeholders, guys, because we talk about stakeholders a lot, and there's a real obvious, who is a stakeholder? It's someone who has a stake, an interest, strong interest in the solution being positive. When I've worked for certain folks, the selection of stakeholders was all about how to go as quick as possible. And obviously speed isn't the only KPI, is it? Because sometimes you want to go through for the highest quality, or you want to go through to get the right cost element, that sort of things. But in my experience, a lot of it was to do with speed. I don't know if it was because the project was very expensive and they wanted to go through. But when you think about looking at your stakeholders, can you throw some sort of regular ones? What's the stakeholder that nearly always turns up? You don't have to name names, obviously, but I'm just trying to bring it alive to folks who might not even, they know what a stakeholder is, but they might not kind of know what the collection of
I can start off with that. So let's say it's application. So you might get a product owner or application owner, project managers, CTIOs, CEOs occasionally, senior managers, anyone that has an interest in project itself. So even engineers, because they have to support it, right? So you've got service teams. They're another one. Anyone involved in supporting or doing part of the migration or budgets, et cetera, et cetera. They're all stakeholders.
Yeah, and Martin, I don't know, I'll come to you, but my experience, so I'm a CTIO, my experience, one of the really key groups that you just mentioned there was the engineers. If you don't bring the engineers along with something, they won't get it, and it can be an absolute disaster. If you bring the engineers along, it can be one of those standout projects that everyone remembers, because it's like, we got everyone. It wasn't being done to us. We did the work together. And also, I think we have 3 engineers on this call, and then we've got the audience as well. Although look, I don't want to promote myself, so I've definitely got 2 engineers, you guys. But the pride that engineers take and the knowledge that they've got, it's not just about bringing people along. It's also about getting that extra bit of insight. When you speak to an engineer and you have a conversation, suddenly you realize something. That was really useful to know. That might be useful in discovery. I don't know if you guys have ever, done that, worked with a stakeholder and then come away and thought, actually, my goodness me, we've just learned something really important.
All the time. So when you go into an environment, you need to, you're going in blind almost, because it's their environment. So you need to understand what the problem is, and like the only way you can probably do that is to work with the engineers, because the project management team, they're not going to be technical enough. So you need that. We're almost like the glue between all of them, right? The engineers and the senior stakeholders.
I got it. So Jace has just put up a good question. We've got a question. Keep them coming, everyone. So clearly a big stakeholder group, the end users. So when it's that kind of project where it's got end users directly, Jace was saying, they could be key to getting the thing accepted, but also gathering requirements. Has that been your experience as well?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's user discovery is critical, obviously depending on what you're actually delivering. But if you're talking about products for an end user, what they need, their needs are obviously primary, and the outcome that you're trying to achieve to deliver a product at the end of the day that's fit for purpose and does what it says on the tin, really. And
does what it says on the tin. We all remember that ad. I hear that every week. Sorry to anyone who doesn't know where that came from, but it was it Ronsil, 1980s?
Yeah, I believe so.
Look it up. If any of you are very confused by that reference, have a look it up on Google. So Jace, thank you very much. And anyone else got any questions? If I can't answer them straight away, I'll get them in as quickly as I can. So if we think about what Dean kind of outlined at the beginning, Martin, you built on it about the sort of the general areas. Let's think about where you can get a challenge in some of those areas, and if you do get a challenge, what that can lead to. And is there any kind of do the business kind of not get it? What's the misconceptions about discovery? Do you turn up and do discovery and people go, "Oh, I thought it was this," but it's actually that, or do people have no preconceptions because it's still not kind of established enough? Or tell us, does anyone want to comment on that?
Okay, yeah. So obviously it depends on the level of understanding within the organisation you deal with people, whether they've these things before and have worked within the discovery space, what they understand about it. But there's all sorts of, I think one of the primary problems at the outset is probably is time. The understanding of certainly senior leadership of what's involved sometimes in delivering these things. There's an end goal that wants to be delivered, whether that's technology or applications, how it's delivered into the end user or customer. Is everybody wants it done quicker and everybody wants it done cheaper. So by sort of trying to expedite a bypass process.
Martin, surely with modern technology, you can do this a lot quicker. You get that kind of, when people really don't understand if it's like magic, they do, and I suppose we can't really blame folks for thinking it should be faster if it is to them like a black box or magic. That's the thing I forget, because I've been doing, this for quite a few years. You kind of forget the feeling you had when you first discovered how all this actually works and how amazing it is. You forget when people look at it, it's genuinely, it's a complete mystery. I don't know if you guys have got any relatives that you assist occasionally with how to fire a remote control or resetting their skybox, that sort of thing. I remember when I got married, I stood up and said, rather than have lost a daughter, you've gained lifetime technical support for your PC. That got a bit of a laugh. So, I think we have to remember that, don't we? But the problem is, if management have made a commitment of timing without doing discovery, then you've got this delicate situation to kind of navigate, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. That's where the sort of this, I think it's worthwhile having that, like he's already alluded to, this methodology or this working practice behind it. I experience this is what we need to do. These are the people. So you can actually articulate back up that message back up properly in a fashion that's understood by a leadership team, and
I get it.
Take that on board and work with that and plan accordingly.
I get it. And so we need to give the senior folks the language to say the following sentence to the board. It might be more complicated than that. What I think we should do first off is have a discovery phase. That should be rather than go, oh yeah, we can get it done in a couple of weeks kind of thing. I said board. I don't mean, obviously public sector and other governments don't have like the board structure, but the kind of the where people make that commitment and assumption, we need to make sure it's based on some good grounding. Let's read another one from Jace. Thanks. Keep them coming. He said it can be an eye-opener how much some enterprises do not have a complete view of what they have. That's a really good one. Key systems, services, they don't know 100%. I mean, I'm itching to say some stuff on this. We're all nodding away, but Dean, I think you nodded first. So come on, what does that chime with your experience? I think
100%. So, and it's not always the organisation's fault. So we've done a lot of government work, and what happens a lot is government departments, they close and they amalgamate, and they turn into different departments, like FCO is now FCDO, for example, and and there's a lot of different, the levelling up department has just popped up from nowhere, and they suddenly have to bring in a load of technology. Some of it's duplicate. You've got to go in and try and understand. The CTO will come in and go, oh, I need to know what systems I've got. I need to know where my data is. I need to know how secure I am. All of those really critical things. And then after they've discovered what they've got, then it's right, now what do we do about it? So the next phase will be like planning on, journey to cloud, etc., or whatever it is that the plan would be. Yeah. So I do get that question. I do understand that question very well.
Cool. And Martin, does that chime with you?
Absolutely. It's them. I can relate particularly to, what I'm doing at the moment. The work I'm on my current contract. Exactly the same thing. A lot of these things as well. The reason behind all that is you can deploy systems and technology into organisations, but they evolve over time, so they change, and if that change isn't tracked, that's where the components come in gradually over time as the systems change.
Yeah. So I think it's probably another session where we anonymously refer to all the times we've been on various different engagements and discovered stuff. But suffice to say, if you're watching this, you could see the three of us nodding. I've been in some situations where we've truly uncovered some things that folks had no knowledge of whatsoever. I think there's probably another angle as well, Jace, which is the more of the deliberate angle I've heard it called shadow IT. So if you think about the explosion of SaaS services, someone needs a credit card and access to the internet. And they can log in and start to, obviously depending on your security and everything else, but that's also another element of discovery. Do you guys use any particular tooling to do discovery work at that level? Do you rely on it, or do you have to, say, well, actually, we've got to use the discovery tools that the client has? Sometimes I find if you go to security, they do actually know where everything is, because they need to be able to scan and understand where things are, but they haven't necessarily had that conversation with the business as to whether it's being used or not. But I don't know whether you guys rely on any tooling at all, or do you work with the engineers and the client? You work with them to do that?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of everything, really, John. So if you think about it, particularly in the government space, with the implications that can be involved, bringing in tools from the outside is pretty much a starter.
Impossible.
But you've also hopefully got a reasonably mature environment within that space that is well documented, well understood, and well managed. In that there'll be existing tooling that you use to interrogate for detail, basically. About it. So,
and that restriction you referred to, Jace had also commented on there. I think we should get Jace on. We should get his camera on, get him join in. Thanks, Jace. Appreciate it. So, could you share some examples of real world projects? Obviously, you don't name clients or anything like that, where a robust discovery phase made a significant difference in the project's success. So a kind of where you could really tell, maybe it's quite obvious that if you hadn't done it, things could have taken a very different course. I don't know if either of you have got. Martin, do you want to go first, or Dean, or it's up to you? Martin?
Yeah, I can go first, no problem. So as I've already mentioned, my existing role as a network architect, working with a multinational team deployed globally. As part of that, they have this existing infrastructure that they use for collaboration, which is a number of different applications over a network. And this is something that again has evolved over time. It's just been built up. And as part of that, there isn't a centralized knowledge base or repository that allows the individual teams to successfully manage this and maintain the environment properly. So I'm in the process of doing the discovery around these applications, the collaborative nature of them, and understanding the network and how they all integrate to actually produce that knowledge base that will then be delivered in a manner that can be accessed by all the teams globally whenever they wish to, which will then subsequently sort of facilitate the ability to operate the environment more efficiently, make better decisions about impact assessments and change that they want to implement in the environment. It'll allow better understanding and working between the teams because of this standard documentation set to agree, and is a reference point that everybody can communicate from and reference. But I think the key thing about it as well, one of the key benefits is retaining knowledge within that environment by providing that. Obviously, there's sharing people over time, and a lot of knowledge is getting presented. It's often this siloed information.
Martin, you went a little bit quiet then, but that's only on the webinar. On the recording, everyone they won't hear that because they'll hear a different recording, which is your local recording. So I just thought I'd just interrupt you to let your system recover a bit. Okay. And then maybe I could just hop over to Dean with the same question.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of examples. So recently I've just worked with military, one of the major military forces, and they had a new chief digital information officer coming on and brought us in and wanted to understand cyber risk in the environment. And they had quite a lot of shadow IT in the environment, and we did uncover a reasonable amount of cyber risk. Not wasn't have danger to national security or anything like that, but needed to be fixed.
Absolutely.
So that was one. The other one I sort of kind of touched on, there was a policing agency that brought together a lot of different departments, a lot of duplication of applications. CTO Chief Data Officer wanted to know where all the data was, and was it protected? Did it?
Dean, that's quite a question.
Yeah.
Tell me where all the data is.
Tell me where all the data is.
I mean, for me, that's a bit like someone coming up to me and saying, "John, can you tell me where all the oxygen particles are?" And I'm like, well, they're everywhere.
It
That's
it was a big job.
I mean, I'm just saying, for me, that's a big one. Look, we've got to mention AI, so let's just say it. We've said AI. This isn't about AI. But if anyone does anything to do with AI, it all starts with data. Just saying. And if anyone mentions AI and doesn't mention data, they're not really talking about AI. But we'll leave it there, Dean. I had to throw it in. But yeah, so I would have loved to have been in the room and seen you get asked the question, "Where's all the data?" I mean, how did you answer that? Would you say?
So it was a team of us. So there was a lot of stakeholder interviews, and then understanding like where the repositories are, and then like connections, like how does data go from one location to the other, and that was very eye-opening as well. I can't go into detail, but
no, of course,
that's interesting.
And so I'm sort of classic kind of business environments are very much sort of Microsoft focused, and some of the tooling they've got is at Purview that I've used. It's really interesting to see. You can see the route things are taking and where they're being shared and all of that, and it's like putting on X-ray goggles, isn't it? And it's just like, wow. It can be, and actually, I mean, it's absolutely critical bit of information, isn't it?
Yep.
Absolutely key for all sorts of things.
Regulation.
It's really fundamental. Yeah.
Yep.
So a quick one, just as a sort of an add-on to that question, really. So Martin, you were talking about, all that work you did in the discovery. If you guys, roll off the project and go on to something else, doesn't all that knowledge then just go away? How do you get it so that when you come in, the next time you haven't got to discover the same stuff? So and are you up against, are they sort of generally not up for that? So you just say, well, okay, we'll do another discovery when we come in, or do you guys encourage like, a CMDB approach and I know CMDB is way more than just a database with a list of things in it, all of that. How do you kind of leave that, create that legacy?
Interesting. So the military one was, one of the recommendations is we get the data in an ITAM and a CMDB. So, so that we don't have to keep doing this. But there was also a lot of non-network stuff, so which makes it tricky to keep that updated. So plan was to sort of eliminate all the non-network stuff as well. So that, the network stuff the CMDB can be auto-populated regularly.
Yeah, I think that's a discussion up front as well as part, when you're setting these things up at the outset, is understanding how this information is managed and environment, and adopting working practices and information across systems as you do work.
Yeah, and I think, Martin, my experience is a lot of folks have got the CMDB, the ITAM. They've got this. They've made the sort of the classic purchases. You could name sort of 5 names that everyone kind of looks at, but they're not populated or they're not up to date to the extent maybe they were done a little bit, when they first got the tool, and then things sort of fade away. So why do you think that is? Do you think it's because we still don't really have the right conversation with how much tech really costs to look after? Because it'd be really interesting to do that with a car, wouldn't it? Or I'm just trying to think about if you did it with something else. Where's your car? I don't know. It's somewhere in North Yorkshire, but I don't keep that much tabs on it, to be honest. You know what I mean? I've got Martin and Dean coming in next week. They're going to find my car for me.
Yeah, it's a lot like that, actually.
It's a daft analogy, but just trying to. No. Why is it? Is it because we don't really give that team the right kind of, that they should be? I mean, when you're manufacturing, they have the bill of materials, don't they? And crikey, you get that wrong, and it's really serious, isn't it? So it's kind of like
it's distributed budgets. I think is one of the things, like if you've touched on before. So if control's not central, then like say the shadow IT can get out of hand. That can be one cause. Just the lack of documentation could be another cause of that, where teams in the past maybe have not kept records as well as they probably should. And Just trying to think of another reason. There was one in my head, but it's probably slipped out now.
That's all right, Dean. It will come back to you.
Yeah.
Happens to all of us, especially on a Friday lunchtime.
Yeah.
Although this is pre-beer, everyone. I'm just going to say, Dean, Martin, and I are going to have a beer at the pub afterwards. We're not, obviously. We're in different parts of the country, although Martin and I are a lot closer than we realised. So, Dean, right at the beginning, you gave a really good summary. I was scribbling away, all these different components to discovery. I think this stage is probably good to kind of get into some of those in a little bit more detail, just to talk through maybe each one a bit for the folks that are listening. So the question is, what are the key activities and deliverables involved in discovery? Because you did sort of rattle those off at the start, but I was just wondering whether we could maybe go through some of them and then how they kind of help us, decide what's the area we're looking at, the scope and, the requirements. So I think I'll try and, you can keep me honest, you guys, if I haven't written them all down, but I think you were talking about some data gathering. You were talking about two types, either data gathering or project discovery. Those were the kind of the two branches.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can get into quantitative and qualitative.
Yeah.
So just for everyone listening, correct me if I'm wrong, Dean and Martin, but quantitative is stuff you can see and count.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, evidence, pretty sort of black and white, as it were. And qualitative is more of a statement or an opinion or something slightly tangential. Yep. You put the two together and that gives you a stronger body of evidence. So,
right.
So if you think about the quantitative side of things, first of all, just practically, what are we counting, Dean or Martin?
Well, that could be where your software tooling comes in and discovers, I don't know, all your applications in your network or your network infrastructure or
number of devices,
end user devices, all of that. Yeah. So that would come under that. So, you could just run a tool and it'll go and discover.
And that could be, Dean, you've got Chrome browser in the estate.
Yeah.
But there are 15 different versions in the estate. And this version has 200.
Yeah.
This one's got 3. That's what we mean by absolute hard facts counting stuff. Yeah, cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And
qualitative,
then qualitative,
is the stakeholder interviews, the end user interviews, application owner interviews, all of that, like understanding how they use the technology, where the pitfalls are, what doesn't work, what they wish it did do, et cetera, et cetera.
That's interesting. So I've heard those two things categorized differently. So I've heard quantitative described as the silicon,
right,
and quantitative described as the carbon, as in the humans. Carbon-based life forms being the qualitative. Cool. And then some of the artifacts that we get to. Can you name some of those? How many of those do you find? Do you have to read them on face value, or do you challenge them? Do you create any artifacts? I mean, do you guys in Discovery create some design documents? Dare I say it, an enterprise architecture level, whatever view of the world?
Can be anything. So we could have do value case, business cases. We could do feasibility studies. We could do just reports, stakeholders, user stories. All sorts of things come to mind there. And
wow,
Martin, don't know if you want to add to that, Martin.
Well, I'm just going to say, so these things differ really, obviously depending on what you're doing. So that depending what the organisation was trying to achieve. So you would expect that what they would change with the sort of discovery project that people would think if you were looking at it from that way. I think for me personally, the key is I keep going back to this structure and methodology that holds everything up. So you understand at the outset, going into do a discovery, how you achieve an objective, and then you have a number of supporting artifacts that you can leverage then into an organisation to deliver a number of sort of predefined outcomes. It's my thing from it. With that, I'm always looking up front. Okay, what do I know about already? What I've got to, or what system the past to achieve in the past to sort of.
So Martin, I was kind of I kind of grew up at a company called Anderson Consulting that became Accenture. Obviously, you can tell it's about 150 years ago. Method was really big. And I remember getting into it and thinking some people were really a little bit dismissive about it. And there was this sort of, you don't need to be that rigid and all the rest of it. But I think they kind of missed the point, because the method for me was a framework to refer to. If I decided not to include something, it's because I knew I needed to at least consider it. But if I hadn't had the method, I wouldn't even have thought of it in the first place. And then basically you're open to kind of accident, or it's just my own internal experience and it's just the way I've always done it. And I think the other interesting thing about a method is it can actually be updated and you can get it pushed out to lots of folks. So I'm just trying to think some of the folks watching might not have that, they might not even really know what a methodology means in the context of technology. But for me, it's a framework. It's got a lot of experience in it, but it's designed so that you can repeat it. And it doesn't matter how, in fact, with our experience, as you get more and more experience, you can add to it. So it's almost like a ginormous to-do list. I mean, I know it's more than that, but you know what I mean? It's that kind of, and you look over it and there's always something you look in and go, oh yeah, of course I should check that. It's a bit like, so I think, methodologies are amazing things, way more amazing than folks give them credit for, because what you're really doing when you see someone who's up for putting out a method, they're saying this is our collective experience. We've actually gone through this and done our own ChatGPT and worked out what's important, what isn't. There isn't any hallucinations in here. This is from us. So when you guys put this method together, it's a lot of experience has gone into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you've sort of already alluded to there, John, that it's a baseline. You build on top of it. It's make sure you cover the essential as a starting point, the essential. And then obviously every project or discovery that you would encounter, every organization is different. It has different requirements, the different outcomes required. So you layer that on top of it to give the specifics, but you're always covering the basics, the baseline. Yeah.
So I really geek out on methodologies, which is probably a good thing given that we're on this call and we're all into tech. But one of the things I looked at with methodology is the difference between a method and a methodology is the word ology. That's really obvious, yeah. But what's an ology? So for me, an ology is it's almost like a philosophy or a direction. I'll give you an example. An ology might be the right way to do this is sequentially, like a waterfall. That could be an ology. Agile might be another ology. Another ology might be absolutely everything we do, the number one consideration is security, and then everything follows. Do you see what I mean? It's a kind of like a bit of that's whatever the sort of the mindset. I suppose it's like the silicon or the qualitative element, Dean, of the method. Yeah, when the method is the sort of accounting stuff. So when you look at your discovery method, do you think there's an ology in there that's come out either consciously or unconsciously from how you've looked at it?
Yeah, probably.
But I mean, no, I think that's a good thing. It's the whole. Yeah. But that's the bit that people don't realize when they look at that's what they should be looking for. You get a huge amount out of a methodology.
Yeah.
It's way more than just a to-do list.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it keeps us honest. And we don't miss things. So, like I say, we as Mark said, it covers bases and, it is a baseline, but that we build on. But without that, you're just all over the place. You're just
and the other thing, Dean and Martin, question to you, but if you bring someone new into the team, they're going to be the enterprise architect 10 years from now. Yeah. Really keen, but they haven't got the experience. Don't you think like a method combined with the experienced people is a great way to bring people up very quickly? Because it's almost like a structured, almost like a continuous professional development thing. Look, next week we're going to do this bit of the discovery method, and you're going to do this on your own.
I don't think you could probably do it with no experience. Obviously, I think you need to have that subject matter expertise behind you. But this, like I say, this keeps you honest. It keeps you within boundaries. Make sure you don't miss anything. Make sure that, you get the right answer that solves the problem.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Dean. Sorry,
I think
go on,
it's
Martin,
also
you look-
providing a level of governance to everything that you do. Standardized
Yes.
level of governance. It's all the time. It's there. Like Dean says, keeping you honest. It's something that governance level is always something holding you to account and keeping you true.
Well, so in terms of that keeping you honest, so you've got your discovery phase. It can help to reduce risk and also to keep on top of cost control. I assume that when projects do get very challenging, that's some of the questions that get asked. I don't have the evidence to support this, but I would have thought intuitively projects that don't do anything structured at the beginning are more likely to have issues later. It's the old saying, isn't it? In fact, I think this is critical from what you guys are saying. It's like an operational universal truth that the more you invest at the beginning of something, the less cost it is to remedy it.
100%.
We've all been there where we've walked into something right at the end and they haven't thought about security. And it's like, you know what, guys, you've probably just got to throw this away because it's too difficult to reverse engineer secure. It's like open source software. If it was born open source, it's okay. But if it was born private and they're trying to make that go open, that's really probably not worth doing. I mean, that's a really very specific example about software, but that's what you're buying into, aren't you? With this discovery, it's not only have you got the structure and the ology and the experience, but it's also you're saying you've got to do this early on because it's going to just sort out all sorts of mitigate sorts of things. So, you guys got anything where you've kind of looked at back and thought, yeah, that could have, if we hadn't done the discovery, that could have been a very different outcome?
I mean, that's probably all of them, if I'm honest.
Come on, Dean, there must have been one where you thought, no, I'm only kidding. No, but obviously,
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just like, sometimes you look at it and you think, yeah, you need them. But in this particular case, maybe the discovery threw up something that they wouldn't have worked out on their own.
Yeah, I think, again, that is probably majority of the discoveries that we do. It always brings up something that no one's aware of. And it usually saves the client a lot of money down the line because, you've identified it early, whether it's cyber risk or whether it's, you didn't know you had all this data that's not within GDPR regulations or the Data Protection Act, you could get fined heavily, that kind of thing. I can't go into specifics for clients, but
of course.
That's probably the things that they get most, probably the things that come up in my mind. There are probably others, but yeah, there are a couple that it's like, oh, right, okay. And then they know how to focus their budgets to rectify that because, otherwise it's going to cost them dearly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can give you a specific example, John. Just of how it can go wrong. I was just asked by a close friend to help him out with a project. He was working for an online retailer. They were trying to implement the Salesforce CRM, their environment. They'd not done the level of discovery that needed at the outset. They'd not involved the primary stakeholders that needed. And as a result of that, the whole thing was backfired on them, and they had to redo the discovery and do it properly. That actually was borne out into, I think it was an extra 10 weeks work to redo the discovery. And I think I was told it was about 35k a week that was running out. So you're looking at 350 grand in Spain and an additional 10 weeks time just from not considering it properly at the outset.
Plus the fact that they've had to do a bit of a Control-Alt-Delete and everything else that goes along with that, and the morale and, all the sort of negative connotations. So that's a really good example for that. So if we think about discovery, we got the as a service, yeah? So we've done a lot on the discovery. Now we do the as a service. And I must confess, I've not heard of many folks providing it as a service. And why would you want to come to another company for this? Why wouldn't you just do it all in-house? What's the, what are you getting What's the kind? I can think of some examples, but you guys are in it, so what's that? Why do I come to you guys instead of having my own discovery team, as it were?
So I've got probably 2 or 3 things or reasons for that.
Go for it, Dean.
So the first would be the experience, the expertise. You might not necessarily have that in-house. And the second one would be objectivity. So, your in-house team might have internal biases and preconceived ideas about how things should work, and bringing in an external set of consultants to do this will sort of like uncover that.
Dean, just hold that third one, but that that kind of preconceived ideas, I think as engineers, that's not necessarily a negative. That's probably people just really owning their space and all the rest of it. We all do it, don't we? We all, when it's your own thing, we all get invested in it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need someone in a very diplomatic way to tap you on the shoulder and say, you might need to look at this differently. And you never would have seen that yourself, even if both engineers are the same skill set. It's just, situational stuff. So I just wanted to get that across, because we're not saying that the engineers and the teams are, don't know what's going on. It's just a thing that happens, isn't it? This is all part of the sort of external. So sorry, Dean, I interrupted you. I think on your second one.
The third one would be efficiency. So just don't always have the resources or the time in-house to be able to do all of this work. So to bring in an external consultancy to do it with expedite the work.
Yeah, got it. Martin, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, with everything that Dean just said, but I would also add to that the ability to scale and flex with the changing environment. If you're discovering new things, you need new skills, more people, whatever. Keeping things in-house, you may not have the relevant skills or people available to do that. So I can insight considerably if you've not this capacity to scale available.
Yeah. I get it. This is a fundamental economic thing, and it's a fundamental of why you would work with a partner versus doing something yourself. So you're not many folks are going to be able to have a bench of experts that cover everything, who are just there waiting to do something. And if they were actually just waiting there to do something, their careers would all be going off the boil, because they wouldn't, they'd be stuck at a point in time. Yeah. So the point is everyone's doing something. And even if you have got similar expertise, I think, Dean, you were talking about the efficiency, and I've also heard that called the opportunity cost. So we've already got this person deployed on X. If we want them to do discovery now, we've got to take them off of X and put them onto discovery. Well, then we lose the momentum we've got on X. That's the opportunity cost bit. So it does actually make a lot of sense. I suppose it's key to have that initial conversation with you guys about what the mix of skills should be in that discovery phase. Is that a thing that you do? You talked about data gathering versus project discovery, Dean. I was just I was going to kind of throw in the what do you do before discovery, because it sounds like before you discover something, you decide you're going to go somewhere. Someone jumped in a boat and eventually found America. The discovery bit was when they got there, but they did something beforehand to kind of get across there. So what's that? Do you have an earlier conversation with the CIO where we sit down and we go, right, I'd like to go, and I think there might be a really big bit of land across that bit of water, but I need some help discovery. How does that work?
Yeah, so that conversation absolutely would happen. Whether it happens before we come along or whether it happens with us is, it doesn't matter. But he identifies a problem that needs to be solved, and that's where the discovery comes in. So it's like, oh, okay, we want to move to cloud. That's the problem, right? Now we have to discover what we've got to move, right?
Oh, sorry, Dean, I'm going to stop you there just quickly. But saying we're going to move to cloud, that is like saying, I want to go over that bit of water, and we think that's a massive.
Exactly.
It's almost equivalent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I suppose you were then having some diplomatic conversations to find out what they mean by moving to cloud. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's exactly why using that as an example. So, but and then it's breaking it down from there really, and then it's sort of like, okay, do you know what your estate looks like? No. Okay. Well, that's one part of the discovery. We need to go investigate. Do you know who your end user customers are, etc., etc. So there's a lot of questions and back and forth,
But also, Dean, I'm getting the sense from you and Martin, quite a bit of diplomacy. There's and I don't mean in a non-authentic way. I mean you've got to. So you guys, if you work on a discovery together, I can imagine you having a conversation saying, stakeholder A was talking about going to cloud, but actually didn't really know what that meant. Stakeholder B was really on it and knew it was to do with workload, understood that our apps aren't ready to go to cloud, so there's a big app migration. But, I don't know, you're kind of joining those dots, but you're kind of, aren't you coming in and sort of announcing things and getting folks to kind of realize that maybe what they've asked for isn't quite what they thought they were asking for? Does that happen?
Yeah, sometimes that can happen. I haven't got any examples come to mind immediately, but it's kind of it's just like having a conversation. It's like, okay, we understand what you're trying to achieve, but there's a lot involved in that. Just do you realize like what you've asked for could be like 5 years worth of work? So we need to break that right down to manageable chunks, and so then it's like, okay, and then we'd prioritize, right? So okay, what are your priorities? What do you need to happen first? Right, okay, well, in order to do that, you've got a dependency here, so then you look at all the dependencies, then all the risks, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot to consider when you've got a question thrown at you that.
And
it's that ability at a high level, I think, John, to have that, to translate that requirement. That's what it is. It's translating a requirement, business requirement, into the job. What's actually entailed in it.
I totally get it. So I write a lot of business technology strategy, which is we need to go and discover America or whatever. So I totally get that. And it is a really interesting conversation where that starts to move away from business and become an engineering conversation. That process that you go through is really fascinating. I wanted to just before I ask you the next question, I had another one, which was, are you guys just around at the start? You get the glory, get the discovery going, and then you're off, and then that's it? Or do you ever, is part of your method checking in to see if there's any sort of steering? And I'm guessing we're talking about some iteration. I mean, it's got to be an iterative process. So you don't discover everything at the beginning and it's done, because that would be kind of waterfall, wouldn't it? That would be called requirements gathering in SSADM, whatever, if anyone remembers that from 100 years ago. So does discovery happen, at some kind of cadence?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, so we would provide governance across the discovery piece, and potentially beyond. And we've got capability. It all depends, right, on resources. Whether we're available, whether it's equivalent to us, whether we're the SMEs in that area. Because we're not SMEs in every single area. Don't get me wrong. We have our specialisms, right? So,
you are an enterprise architect, Dean. So
so overall,
I'm going to get my money's worth.
Inch deep, mile wide, and all that for myself.
I know,
but I do have some specialisms, as does Martin. Sure. So it depends on the project again, but on the whole, we provide governance oversight.
And Jace has just put up another note, which is he was saying, I think he's suggesting also coming out of discovery, there's some information that goes into some of the planning and the business cases and all the rest of it. So actually, you're gathering some of that core information that's going into those sorts of governance documents as well.
Yeah.
And actually, the business case, I've done a few public sector business cases. They're normally about just about as tall as you are when you stand up, sort of thing. But it's very, very important, isn't it, to show how you gathered the information. These assumptions have come from the following activity, and if you've got a method that you've executed, and that's going to be a big bit of your appendices as well. That's important, because it just means, well, we didn't make this up. We went through a process to find this out.
Yeah.
So let's say we're going to find someone in the marketplace to do discovery for us. What should I be looking for, and what should I be avoiding if I'm looking for, and when I say avoiding, I don't want any names or anything, but I think I know what I'd be looking for.
Yeah.
But from your point of view, there's people watching this now, or they're watching it on replay. They go, yeah, actually, this sounds really good. What should they be looking for in a company that does decent discovery as a service?
So in my view, it's a little bit like hiring an employee. So you'd be looking for expertise and experience. You'd be looking for reputation and references. You'd be wanting to see their portfolio and some of the samples they've already done, and you'd want to look at their methodologies and their processes. So they're the key ones, I think, in my mind, that spring to mind straight off the bat.
Martin, any adds to that?
Yeah, I just added again this issue around scalability and the ability, and I'd be questioning if something unexpected arises, if we need to pivot, how are you going to deal with that? Have you got the resources to deal with that? And you're not just essentially throwing bodies at a problem that aren't sort of skilled to deal with the problem that we've got and solve it.
Yeah,
I think that's quite important.
So the only one I'd throw in from what you guys said is also, so I've been very privileged to work in public sector and in private sector, and I've worked in some really interesting different branches of public sector as well. And whilst when I was first starting out, I would want people to put me anywhere, I can do anything, that kind of, when you get the experience, you realize there is actually some very specific sets of skills, particularly with stakeholders in those different environments. So I think that's probably the other thing I would look for, is to make sure the team are going to get on well with the culture of, and kind of know how, know the protocol, know how to speak to people and how to get stuff done, and don't turn around and go, well, I want to speak to the CEO, I want to get some decisions done, because it's not like that in certain environments. It's much more, there's proper decision-making process to go through, and for good reason, because it's public money. So that's the only thing I would add. So guys, it's absolutely amazing. Massive thank you first off to Jace for the contribution. We're just coming up to the hour, and just wanted to say to Dean and to Martin, huge thank you for the contribution. I've learned tons, and I've really, really enjoyed talking about this. I just feel like we should have like an after session meeting where we can talk about all our war stories and stuff like that. But before we sign off, I just ask each of you maybe to, if there was a sort of a key message you wanted to get across to folks that are watching this about discovery as a service, what should they take away from the session? So, Dean, have you got anything, that you would say, look, if you want to remember 3 things, it doesn't have to be 3, what would it be about discovery as a service?
How important it is for a successful project, how it can just open your eyes, I guess, to what you're actually dealing with, and the size of the problem that you might not realize, and it can be it can be fun. So just get involved.
I'm glad you threw that in. I think you're absolutely right. I want to do one right now. So Martin, what's your, thanks Dean. Martin, what would your takeaways be?
I think I would say prepare to be surprised, because the reality is probably not what you're expecting.
Yeah, going with an open mind kind of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And be prepared to adjust your plans accordingly.
So that's really interesting, isn't it? Because how can you discover something if you've got a closed mind?
Absolutely.
If it's in front of you and you've got a closed mind, there's nothing you can do to discover it. That's called denial. Brilliant. Well, look, Dean, Martin, everyone who's watching now over their lunch, and folks on replay, just a huge thank you. Really, really appreciate it. There'll be, this will go out on the Certes website shortly once we've edited it and Dean and Martin have signed it off. But I just want to say, when it eventually appears, have a lovely weekend and a happy Friday to all. And I'm going to sign off now. So thank you very much.